Hey everyone, Valentin here. So today I want to talk to you about how to get shredded completely naturally and what happened to me while doing so. I will also give you tips how to do it and if you really have to to pull it off, because let's be honest, most of us don't have the genetics to do it, nor it is really healthy for most of us. Like, it's gotta be sustainable long term, and what I mean by long term is that you have to be able to maintain this body fat for a year straight. So this video is for educational purposes only, and I do not advocate you to get that shredded naturally unless you have the great genetics to do so. So pretty much what I did, but I don't have the great genetics to do that, so I ran into a bunch of problems that I will discuss in this video. So without further ado, let's get down to it. So the first thing that you have to understand is that the way you look when lean is going to be determined by the amount of muscle mass that you carry, that can be gained either through drugs or training. So another thing is that you're going to have to be in a caloric deficit whether you want it or not. And the amount of caloric deficit is going to be, and how long you're going to be in it, is going to be determined by your starting point and your genetics. So like how hard you bulked previously. And remember, the fatter you are, the bigger the initial caloric deficit can be in order to strip the body fat. So for me, for example, when I was bulking, I was 240 pounds or 110 kilograms. So initially, in order to bulk to that point, I used to eat 1000 grams of carbs and 215 grams of protein and 120 grams of fat. So my initial caloric deficit, I pretty much sliced my carbs from 1000 to 500, and what happened to me is that I lost around 14 pounds or 7 kilos in a 2-day period, but I wasn't looking significantly leaner. Like, it wasn't really noticeable at all, to be honest, because I was still very much fat, and the leaner I was getting, the more muscle mass I was losing. So yeah, I'll flip on the screen my transformation from 240 pounds to 170 pounds. So it was like a 70-pound loss, or like 31 kilos over a 4-month period. So there are generally two schools of thought when it comes to training and getting leaner in terms of what you have to do with your training volume, etc. So the first school of thought is you have to train a lot because your minimum required volume to maintain adaptation is getting higher the leaner you get, and your maximum recoverable volume gets lower, the ceiling gets lower. So you have to strike that perfect balance. You have to train enough to be leaner, and by the way, you need to train way more when you're getting under 10% body fat. Like, the required volume is way higher than when you're, let's say, 12% body fat range. On top of training a lot, you have to understand that when training with higher volumes, there is a lot of muscle inflammation, so your muscles get this more round and fuller look, which contributes a lot to your aesthetics when you're getting leaner. It doesn't happen as much when you don't train like as higher volume. So all of this inflammation and intrinsic storage factors is very temporary, and it only happens for as long as you train with higher volumes. So when you stop training as much, you pretty much lose everything in around 8 to 10 days period, something like that. It's been my experience very much with that. And the second school of thought is you train, you do the bare minimum to maintain adaptation, and you recover way better. So you try to maintain your loads in the gym, your training volume has to be pretty consistent, and you still have to train enough to maintain your muscle mass. But you won't be able to grow nearly as much, for example, when you're training with higher volume. And you pretty much at this point, you're only looking to maintain what you have. So yeah, also another problem with training with higher volumes when dieting is that, as you might know from my previous video, is that your appetite gets exponentially higher the more you train, the harder you train. So it can be really problematic when your calories are getting low, because your appetite is already going to be increased, but it's going to be increased tenfold depending on the individual, obviously. But it's going to be way more increased when you train a lot, and especially when you get to 10% or under caloric deficit. On top of getting more fatigued, it's making your dieting way harder than it should be. Another thing that you have to understand is your macronutrients when you're getting leaner and what they have to look like. Especially if you're looking to get under 10% body fat, your macronutrients become like more and more important. So much so, before you could only get away with eating a certain amount of calories. Obviously, you have to eat enough carbs to maintain performance and enough fats and protein to maintain your muscle mass. But as you get leaner, it gets way more important. Like your carb intake, your fat intake ratio, and your protein gets way more important as you get under 10% body fat. So when you get under 10% body fat, it is critical that you try to eat as many carbs as you can get away with. Unfortunately, with carbs you retain a bit more water, but it's going to be absolutely essential if you want to maintain your performance and you want to maintain your lows in the gym. Protein wise, you're gonna have to increase, particularly if you're getting under 10% body fat, you're gonna have to increase your protein to around 2.5, from 2 to 2.5 to 3 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, because as you're getting leaner, your body is gonna be more prone to burn through your stored proteins, which is muscle, as a preferred fuel source than fat. So yeah, if you're looking to preserve as much muscle mass as possible, increase your protein to what I just told you. And in terms of fat, I mean, your caloric deficit is gonna come from somewhere. So I really recommend you lowering your fat intake. It's also gonna be highly beneficial for your body composition, because if you lower your fat, your body's gonna burn through more fat instead of muscle. So as far as my experience goes, again, in 2015 I got really ripped. First of all, I bulked. I gained a lot of muscle in that time frame from 2014 to 2015, but I bulked from 165 pounds to 240 pounds, which can be greatly beneficial for changing your initial body set points in terms of how much muscle mass you can carry. I think it can be really useful, especially in your first 2 years of training when you're particularly really prone to putting on muscle. And yeah, and then once I bulked, I maintained there for a while, and then I started getting ripped. I went from 240 pounds, which is 110 kilos, to 170 pounds, and down to around 7% body fat. So to maintain this muscle mass, I trained anywhere from 25 sets to 30 sets per workout, 6 days a week. And I'm not gonna lie, it was really tough to recover from, because I was still a full-time student when I was back in Sarasota, and it was very stressful. I was not recovering from it. My bench was way down. I wasn't even benching like 225. I was benching, I think 225 for like 5 reps or something like that. I was quite smaller than I am now, by the way. So pretty much, as the leaner I was getting, the tougher the diet was, obviously. But particularly when I started dipping under 10% body fat, I started noticing that, I would start noticing junk food anywhere I went. I was in the gym just looking at pizza commercials, or when I went to Walmart, I would look at those Chips Ahoy cookies. I was really craving those. And one thing for sure, I would wake up every day starving, or sometimes I would wake up at night and I would just starve, and I would think about food all the freaking time. Another fun thing that I used to do, I would buy a lot of junk food, and I would try to fit in as much junk food as possible. But what I noticed very quickly that my macronutrients weren't really allowing much for that, because I was still very much I would stay very hungry. This junk food would not satiate me at all whatsoever. So I started eating bro food for the most part, and I would still be really hungry, and I would eat tons of fiber, up to 70 grams of fiber per day, which is a lot, to be honest. So yeah, pretty much food was the only thing on my mind 24/7. Another thing very important, what happened during the time period, I stopped getting erections. I noticed I wouldn't get hard for 6 months straight. I would get really depressed. I would lose motivation in the gym, but I still managed to push through, which I'm very thankful for myself. So my parents suggested me to go and check my testosterone. So I went ahead and checked it, and it turned out that I was in a range like lower than what women in their 80s have. So it was very alarming. So I had to go on TRT for a 6-month period, and it was a long ester, which was, it was pretty much a roller coaster, because I would pin once a month and not like twice a week or once a week like a lot of dream bros do to increase their testosterone. So it was very much a roller coaster. But honestly, it was a very fun experience all in all. It taught me a lot about myself, what I can achieve, what I can push through, and all that stuff. So what happened next, right? So it was around Christmas time that I pretty much was maintaining my leanness, and it was time for a cheat meal, right? So I decided to go ahead and have a cheat meal. And before I knew it, when I came back to school, the semester was like really tough. The curriculum was really tough. I was swamped with homework. So my willpower, because pretty much your willpower is finite. You cannot like just go ahead and just exercise your willpower as much as you want. It's a finite resource, your willpower. So I was pretty much doing homework and all that stuff, and I started binging, and I went from 170 to 210 pounds in 2 months time. So I looked like a football player. I was like ripped at first, and people started noticing like what happened to you, bro? Like, you used to be like so ripped, now you're like freaking, you look like a football player. So that was pretty funny. So from then on, I just reduced my training volume because I was doing a lot of junk volume at the time. I hired a coach which gave me like a really terrible program, which had me training a lot. So I hired another coach who wrote me a powerlifting program which was a bit lower volume, which was still 6 days a week, by the way. I was still busting my ass off, but it was definitely completely different. It was not the same. And from then on, my appetite just plummeted after around like 4 months of being like kind of chubby. So from then on, I just maintained a healthy body weight of 180 to 185 pounds. So yeah, thank you very much guys for watching this video. I hope a lot of you learn some things about themselves and or will learn in the future. And this is advice not necessarily for all of you to go ahead and get as ripped, but I mean, you can try to get lean to 10%. That's pretty cool. That's good for the beach, it's good for the girls and all that. So I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys in the next video. Thank you.